Hello, my name is Cristina Alexandru. This is a demonstration of using the Scirocco tool to assess the maturity of healthcare systems for integrated care. For an overview of the methodology behind this assessment, please consult the previous video. As outlined in the methodology, the first step involves identifying local stakeholders for the assessment. As integrated care is designed and deployed by multidisciplinary teams, it is important to capture the diversity of perspectives in the assessment process. Therefore, we recommend to organizers inviting stakeholders from different disciplines, sectors, and positions in the organization. In the next step, each of the stakeholders is asked to perform an individual assessment. To prepare for individual assessments, organizers should invite selected stakeholders to register and use the Scirocco tool. Also, they need to distribute to them the various supportive documentation as well as online tutorials provided on the Scirocco project's website. To perform an individual assessment, each stakeholder is asked to provide a rating between 0 and 5, reflecting their view on the maturity of their healthcare system on a particular dimension of integrated care. Together with a rating, they should also provide the justification for that rating. At this stage, each stakeholder will conduct the assessment process independently, because this is a self-assessment process, and it is important to capture individual perceptions and opinions on the way that integrated care is designed and deployed in their healthcare system. If a doctor wants to perform an individual assessment of her healthcare system, she will need to first access the Scirocco tool. From the main page, she needs to go to the Healthcare System Assessments tab, and then click on the New Individual Healthcare System Assessment button. This takes her to the main maturity assessment page. Here, she can provide a name for her assessment, which by default consists of her name and that of the healthcare system with which she will associate her assessment. Moreover, she can provide as optional 10 additional characters to indicate, for example, that this assessment is about a particular region in her healthcare system. Then the page contains two tabs: the Assessment tab, containing the main components of the EIP on AHA maturity model, and the Description tab, which, as we can see from the red star next to it, is compulsory to be filled in. Returning to the Assessment tab, we can see on the left-hand side a questionnaire consisting of 12 questions corresponding to the 12 dimensions of the maturity model. For each of the questions, we have 6 ratings numbered from 0 to 5, as well as an associated narrative outlining the objectives of the dimension, which is accessible by clicking on the eye icon. As soon as the doctor has provided a rating for a dimension, she is required to also provide a few short sentences to justify it, and this is a compulsory field. On the right-hand side, we have a spider diagram with the 12 dimensions represented as labels on its axis. At the intersection of the circles and the axis, we can see the 6 ratings. The user can also interact with the spider diagram. As one would expect, interacting with either the form or the spider diagram would record results in both. For the readiness to change dimension, the doctor may want to first read the narrative and then consider the ratings. She may decide to go with the third rating. This automatically gets recorded in the spider diagram as well. She also needs to provide the justification for the rating. Here, I'm just giving a test justification, however, a few short sentences should be provided instead. To move to different ratings, the doctor can click on the arrows, on the links from the top of the form, or on the labels from the spider diagram. Going to the second dimension, she may again want to read the narrative and ratings. She can record her rating in the spider diagram as well, and this automatically shows it in the form. She will also need to provide the justification as usual. Going to the third dimension, she will also record it in the spider diagram. At this point, the doctor may want to save this intermediate version of the assessment. However, she is getting a red error message. Please reply to all the questions marked star. This is because she has forgotten to provide a justification for the dimension 3 where she had a rating. Also, the description tab is red because she has forgotten to associate a healthcare system to this assessment. Once she selects such a healthcare system, she can click on the eye icon to read a definition of this healthcare system, a definition of integrated care for it, and the local ambition with regards to integrated care of this healthcare system. Once the doctor saves again, because this time she has provided justifications for all of the ratings as well as a description, she will receive a confirmation that her questionnaire was successfully saved. She will get the same confirmation by email. Going to the Healthcare System Assessments tab, this time the doctor will be able to see her newly created individual assessment there. She can click on the Edit Pencil icon to open it for further editing. This will open the assessment from where it was left off, and the doctor can continue filling it in. Therefore, the doctor may end up with this spider diagram. In conclusion, the outcomes of individual assessment are visually captured in the form of spider diagrams. These diagrams provide quick detection of strengths and weaknesses in integrated care, as well as a basis for discussion and negotiation with other stakeholders to reach the consensus on the current state of art. As a multidisciplinary team was involved in the assessment process, this means that they may have different perceptions and thus generate different spider diagrams from their individual assessments. In comparison to the doctor's spider diagram, an IT specialist, nurse, and administrator may have different points of view and may thus generate very different spider diagrams. In the third step, each of the stakeholders is asked to share their individual assessment with the organizers. If the doctor wants to do so, she can go back to the Healthcare System Assessments tab, and for her assessment, click on the Share icon. This will take her to the Share Assessment page, where she can see that she is the owner and originator of this assessment. Underneath, she can provide the email address of the organizer and click Share. This will give immediate feedback in the table. The originator, will become the viewer of the assessment. Later, the doctor may decide to unshare this assessment. She may also decide to make the organizer the owner of this assessment, so its sole editor. This requires a confirmation. If the doctor confirms by clicking OK, feedback will again be represented in the table. The organizer would become the owner, so the editor, while now the doctor is only the viewer of the assessment. However, because she was the originator, so the original author of the assessment, she can later make herself the owner again. During the fourth step, the team need to negotiate and reach consensus. First, each regional organizer of the assessment process needs to review the individual responses and, using the Scirocco tool, produce a composite spider diagram combining all the stakeholders' individual responses. This will help the organizer identify the areas where consensus has been reached, as well as those areas where consensus has not been reached, and thus there is a need for further consensus building. The organizer can then prepare a face-to-face consensus building workshop with all of the stakeholders in order to review the outcomes of the individual assessments and reach consensus on the maturity of their healthcare system. This is also an opportunity to discuss suggestions for future improvements. The tool supports overlaying the different individual spider diagrams from the stakeholders' assessments. This allows identifying those areas of agreement as well as those areas with differences in maturity scoring. These outcomes then serve as the basis for discussion and consensus building in a very structured way. During the consensus building workshop, which should be organized with the participants of the self-assessment process, we recommend discussion being mainly focused around those dimensions with the greatest diversity of scoring. The Scirocco partner and/or the organizer of the assessment process should facilitate the discussion. Moreover, the workshop requires at least one moderator and one person taking notes. The outcomes from the workshop are a commonly agreed spider diagram containing the consensuses of the different stakeholders on all of the dimensions, as well as agreement on the priority areas for action to take forward. Let's take an example of how the team would deliberate the standardization and simplification dimension, where there was disagreement. Here, we can see that one of the stakeholders proposed a higher ranking. It was the administrator who justified, "We are all using LCL7 Fire." However, two stakeholders considered that the rating should be 2 levels down. It was the nurse and doctor who explained, "Yes, but getting the devices to interoperate is a nightmare." Finally, one stakeholder considered that the rating should be somewhere in between. It was the IT specialist who mentions, "This will all be resolved soon as we are joining an international standards group for devices." Reaching consensus requires looking through the justifications for the individual assessments of the stakeholders, as well as holding such a discussion. In this example, they may decide that the administrator had a too optimistic view, while the nurse and doctor had a too pessimistic one. Therefore, they may decide to go with a middle ground. Such a discussion would need to happen for each of the dimensions where there was disagreement, starting with those where there was highest level of disagreement. Again, the Scirocco tool supports this process. Let's imagine being in the workshop and the organizer wanting to record the deliberations of the team. She can access the Scirocco tool and from the main page go to the Healthcare System Assessments tab. Once there, the organizer can select the individual assessments which had been shared with her by the individual stakeholders. Please note that here they appear as coming from the same person. However, in reality, each of them will be shared by a different stakeholder. Once selected, the organizer can click on Compare and enter consensus. This takes her to the Consensus Maturity Assessment page. This looks like any assessment page, but also shows the different opinions of the different stakeholders. In the form, it shows with different colored dots, the opinions on ratings by the different stakeholders. And underneath, the justifications are also highlighted in different colors. On the right-hand side in the spider diagram, it shows the overlaid individual spider diagrams of the stakeholders. As usual, clicking on the eye icon shows a narrative for each dimension, and moving between the dimensions can be done by using the arrows, the links from the top of the form, or the labels from the spider diagram. To understand what a color means, the organizer can look at the legend. She can also click on any of the assessments highlighted in those colors from the legend, which opens up that assessment into a separate tab for viewing only. This means that the organizer can look at the rating provided by the stakeholder for each dimension and the associated justification, and she can move between the dimensions as usual. However, she cannot edit any of the ratings or justifications. Going back to the Consensus tab, it is here that, as usual, the organizer can provide a name for this assessment, and generally speaking, she needs to use this assessment during the deliberation process. The page has an Assessment as Description tab as usual, where the Description tab is compulsory to be filled in. During the deliberation, the team will need to look at all of the dimensions where there was disagreement. For example, in Readiness to Change, 3 participants proposed a rating of 3 and 1 proposed a rating of 2. Here they may decide to go with a rating of 2 because this person was more experienced in this field. As usual, a justification is required whenever a rating is provided. And here the justification should reflect the discussion of the team. The next dimension where there was disagreement was the information and the health services dimension. Here, we can see that 3 stakeholders proposed a rating of 2 and 1 stakeholder proposed a rating of 1. In this case, through deliberation, the team may decide to go with the majority, so with a rating of 2, which automatically appears in the spider diagram as well. The organizer must also, as usual, provide the justification for the rating, reflecting the deliberation of the team. For the standardization and simplification dimension, there was more disagreement. They may decide to go with a middle ground, so a rating of 2. As usual, the organizer can also directly interact with the spider diagram in order to record this rating, which automatically records it in the form as well. This time she may want to save this intermediate version of the questionnaire. However, we see that she gets a red error message, because she has forgotten to provide the justification for the standardization and simplification dimension. Moreover, if we scroll up, we can see that the description tab is also red, because she has forgotten to associate a healthcare system to this assessment. As for an individual healthcare assessment, the organizer can read a definition of this healthcare system by clicking on the eye icon. The last thing that I would like to show you is that, through discussion with the team, they may decide that one dimension is a priority for them for the improvement of their healthcare system with regards to integrated care. They can mark it as a priority in the form, which also shows it as a priority on the label in the spider diagram. Once the organizer saves again, because this time she has correctly provided justifications for all ratings as well as a description, she will get a confirmation both on the page and by email. Returning to the Healthcare System Assessments tab and scrolling down, she will see her consensus assessment being saved. She can further edit it, export it in a PDF format, share it with colleagues, initiate a twinning and coaching process, or hide it from her view. If she clicks on the Edit Pencil icon, this takes her back to the Consensus Maturity Assessment page, where she can further edit her assessment. Finally, the team will end up with a consensus spider diagram, which is represented in black so that it stands out. The final step involves analyzing the outcomes. An analysis of the outcomes or gap analysis of the self-assessment process is conducted to identify strengths and weaknesses. Moreover, action plans or recommendations should be developed on how to address gaps. Finally, the outcomes of the assessment process can also serve as a basis to identify complementary regions or organizations which can help each other to address particular needs or gaps identified in the process. Thank you for your attention. For more information about the Scirocco methodology for the self-assessment process, please use the contact details in this slide.